Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today we have a very special bonus episode, and I'll be discussing Netflix 2022 science fiction action comedy film, The Adam Project. This is directed by Shawn Levy. It stars Ryan Reynolds, Mark Ruffalo, Jennifer Garner, Walker Scobell, Keener and Zoe Saldana. I'm Jesse, and I am riding solo with this special episode. I'm going to put it out there early that I'm going to spoil this movie. So if you haven't checked out this brand new release on Netflix, The Adam Project, then give us a pause and come back a bit later on. And hopefully if you're continuing on, it means you've seen the film and you're ready to hear my thoughts on what this one's all about. And that will lead me into the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary about what the film is all about. So for this one, this is about a crash landing during a time travel mission means that Adam must team up with his 12-year-old self to save the future. So if you're into those classic films like Back to the Future or anything to do with a little bit of time travel, then this one might be for you. I guess this sort of first popped up on my radar during the Super Bowl, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but I know that Netflix had a huge trailer that they put out, which included them committing to putting out a new release every Friday, I guess, a new feature Netflix original film, and the back end, well, that trailer had, little short quick cuts of all of the ones that are coming up, and the back end of that trailer was a nice sneak preview for this one, and I guess that sort of got me intrigued a little bit. And going into it a little bit further, this one, it was sort of announced as the title being Our Name is Adam way back in October 2012, and this is when Paramount Pictures had the rights for the project, or became interested in acquiring the film, and the reason they wanted this was because Tom Cruise was attached to star in this film, and it sort of sat in development hell for quite a while, and Netflix took it off Paramount in July of 2020, and then that's how we've ended up with it coming to Netflix streaming services across the world. It was filmed from the 18th of November 2020 right through to the 8th of March 2021, so lots of specialty sort of things done on set to ensure that COVID restrictions were upheld, and it was a safe production. And as I mentioned, the working title was Our Name is Adam, but obviously went on to become The Adam Project. And I guess across the world, it's got some different translations. In Greek, it's called Business Adam, which a little bit iffy. Japan, it's called Adam and Adam. And I really like that, in particular, tying in with the two Adams having to work together, and the Russian title sort of stuck with the working title of Our Name is Adam. But based on recent news, I think Netflix have pulled the pin in Russia for the time being, so I'm not too sure many people in Russia will be able to check this one out on their local Netflix streaming devices. The tagline for this one, it had two. One was past meets future, so pretty meh, nothing too special. And then the last one is time flies. So both are sort of mixing in with that idea of the sci-fi elements of time travel and where it's going. So this is only 2 days after it was released on Netflix as I'm recording this. It was released on the 11th of March 2020, filmed in and around British Columbia in Canada, especially in and around Vancouver. The consensus so far, so obviously very early days on these reviews, so it's probably going to change a bit, but when I checked it out recently on Rotten Tomatoes, so the critics' combined scores, it sits on 69%, and that's on 130 reviews, so that sits at fresh, and quite a few critics have got on there very early for this one. The audience on Rotten Tomatoes has it at a little bit higher at 83%, and that's also on a fairly high amount, on over 250, so quite a few people have got onto Rotten Tomatoes for this one. Same with IMDb, a bit over 12,000 people have logged it, and it sits on a very solid 7 out of 10 on IMDb from the general public. And then finally, Letterboxd, the one that we look at for our film-loving or film-going audience that sort of critique things a little bit harder, it sits at a 3.2 out of 5 on about 10,500 reviews, so a very solid score there as well. And that will lead me into my early thoughts for this one. And to be honest, this was so much fun. I was pleasantly surprised. I think the performances in this are excellent, and the story, it's really engaging, and there's plenty of laughs along the way, and the action, it's pretty decent for a Netflix film. So I think to sort of wrap it up before I get into some characters for this film, I think that there's a lot of heart, and this is well worth a watch. If you've got your family, need something to watch on the weekend, I couldn't recommend it highly enough at the moment, and I've only watched it once, but I'm already thinking about when I can watch it again. So let's have a chat about some of the characters in this film. As I mentioned before, if you haven't seen the film, I've done a pretty good job so far to not say much, but I'm going to have to spoil it a little bit as I talk about the characters. So obviously, as I mentioned, this film's about Adam. So we've got the young Adam, who's a 12-year-old Adam who is in the present time of 2022, and then we've got the older version of Adam who's 44, I think, from memory, and he's sort of come back from the year 2050 to sort of change a few things. So we'll start off with the younger version of Adam, and he's put forward as this nerdy young kid, gets beaten up by the bullies at school, and the big point in his life at the moment is that he's struggling with the death of his father, and unfortunately he takes this grief and this inability to deal with it out on his mum. There's one of those little tropes that you'd often see in these types of movies where he uses an inhaler to sort of calm himself down, and I think that as a young character, so this young kid plays with the older version, which is played by Ryan Reynolds, and the two of them together, especially this young kid, he has a great ability to help his older self learn from his past and be ready to move forward with the future. And I think that the interactions and the chemistry between the two on screen was excellent, and a lot of the jokes that Reynolds puts out there definitely land because of the ability for this young actor to bounce off him. So that sort of leads me into Ryan Reynolds' version of Adam, the older Adam, and we know that he's successful in the future. He's the captain of this ship that he's on, or this starcraft, or whatever it is, but the trauma that he's dealing with in his life at this current stage is that he's lost his wife. And obviously, in the past, he's had to struggle with the loss of his dad too, and this idea of having these daddy issues his whole life. And I think that the film does a really good job of highlighting this and working through this older version of Adam. And that sort of leads us into the dad character, Lewis, who is played by Mark Ruffalo. It doesn't hit the screen until probably an hour into this film, and they pump him up a little bit. Like, we see photos in the house of him with the boy and all that sort of stuff, and he obviously died early on in his life, in Adam's life, and the key to his I guess his need in this film is that he invented time travel, and the project that this time traveling project was, he titled it the Adam Project. So obviously after his son, and there's this one line of, that it's his favorite child, that the Adam Project is his favorite child, not the actual Adam, and that's enough to sort of tell you of how absent a father he was and the impact that it did have on Adam. So it's clear that he was too interested in being a scientist to actually worry about what was going on at home, even though they do make it clear that when he was at home, he was 100% a good dad. It's just that his focuses were in other places throughout, and that leads us on to Ali, which is Adam's mum, and played by Jennifer Garner, always there for Adam when he's younger, but it as well is struggling with the loss of her husband and Adam's dad, and Adam's behavior as a young kid and his attitude, especially in regards to her starting to date again and at school. It's sort of getting in the way of her life, her work, her ability to focus too. And I think that, just dropping in her going in on a date and just into the film is such a thing that so many people would be able to resonate with, that if you lose a parent, the worst thing that you could possibly imagine is your parent finding someone else. It's almost like replacing that parent, and I think it was done really subtly and really nicely in this film. Laura is the wife of Adam, played by Zoe Saldana. Not in it an awful lot, but the moments that she is there, she does bring a great charisma to the screen, and I think Zoe Saldana is a fantastic actress, and that sort of leads us to the opposites, I guess, the villains or the bad guys in this film. And they're not necessarily the most evil villains that you'll ever see in your life, but Maya Sorian, she's set up as the big villain, and she helped fund the Adam Project and worked with Lewis, or Adam's dad. And as we see through her various stages throughout time, or her character throughout time, her focus became more on the money than on the scientific values or the ability to make change in the world. And this led to her becoming lonely and had nothing but this company that she needed to focus on. So you can see the downfall in her, but realistically not a massively fleshed out villain, but you didn't really need that because the focus of this story is about the family, Adam, his relationship with his mum and dad, and with the younger and older self. And the last sort of character I'll throw in there is Christos, who's this other bad guy who just sort of does the bad work for Maya. And there's sort of a mention that he went through the academy with the older Adam, runs the security for Maya, and he's got this really scarred up sort of face that we're told Adam did to him. So I think Adam mentions that his face matches his soul. So a nice little funny thing to add in there with Christos. Time to talk about the director of this one, Shawn Levy. So lots of credits across the board. So he's got 64 producer credits for things such as Stranger Things, Last Man Standing, the reboot of Unsolved Mysteries, so a couple of Netflix things in there, Cheaper by the Dozen 2, and Pink Panther 2. So has a fair a range of work, and including directing as well. Also has 43 directing credits, including the comedy Date Night, Real Steel with Hugh Jackman. Obviously, he likes to work with Ryan Reynolds. He directed Free Guy, which only came out about 12 months ago, and is set to be the director of Deadpool 3, again with Ryan Reynolds. I think he did the Night at the Museum films too, and if we go all the way back to the start of his career, he actually directed a few episodes of the Animorphs TV show. So some 90s kids who are listening to this, you might remember the book series, The Animorphs. I think it was written by K.A. Applegate, pseudonym name, I think, but yeah, directed some of those shows, and I fondly remember Animorphs growing up. And that's going to take me into some scenes. So I'd like to discuss the scenes that we enjoyed in this one. And for me, there's quite a bit that I enjoyed in this. And I think a lot of the humour is where it plays through for me. The humour and the heart, they're the two things that I've gathered my scenes from. So I think to start off with, when the two Adams meet, they're in the garage, and the old Adam says, "Oh, I was shot." And, you know, he's bleeding, and then the younger Adam says, "With a bullet?" And the older Adam replies and says, "No, I was stabbed with one." And I think it just made me laugh, and then continued on with this little joke that he makes about his wound where the bullet hole is, makes a fart noise. So a little bit childish but humour, but I thoroughly thought that was funny. Continuing on, the young Adam, they're in a conversation, the young and the old Adam, and the young Adam asks the older one if he remembered being here in 2022, you know, is it like a multiverse? And the older Adam sort of retaliates and tells him, "You watch too many movies." So a nice little whack there at the Marvel Cinematic Universe is how I'm taking that one. Again, the boys are in the garage together, and the young Adam sort of admiring the older Adam's body and says, "You're kind of ripped." And he's like asking, you know, "Do you work out?" And he goes to touch it, and touch his like muscles. It was just quite funny. And then the older Adam says, you know, "Don't touch it," and then follows up with a question about girls and college and things like that. And his response to the younger Adam is that time travel exists, but your question is, do I get laid? And he sort of walks off, and then the younger Adam sort of like sits there and he's just happy. He's like, "Yes, it's going to happen." So quite funny. Like I mentioned at the start, the two bouncing off each other worked quite well in this one. There's a scene where later in the film, the younger Adam is being harassed by the bullies again that we saw from the start of the film, and he sort of lets the older Adam lets the younger Adam sort of take a few hits, and he sort of runs off, and then the older Adam goes up to the bullies and grabs him and says, "I will find you and I will pull the bones out of your body." And then the poor kid starts peeing his pants, and the older Adam's like, "Oh, you're a real streamer, go home and clean yourself up." So just nice little lines, and me saying these out loud now don't actually seem that funny, so maybe you do need to see the film to get what I'm talking about. Some more scenes about heart, I guess. And Ellie, the mum, is in the bar talking to the bartender, and the older Adam's sitting there, and he sort of intertwines the conversation without her knowing who he was, and talking about, you know, boys always coming back to their mamas. And it was just a really nice scene, trying to reflect on where he's at and how he's disappointed in himself for the way that he treated his mother early on in his life. And I think reading a little bit about this film, Ryan Reynolds actually added that line in himself and based it on his own personal life. So a nice little scene there too. Again, like the first scene where we see Laura, Adam's wife, you know, she enters this battlefield to sort of save them, and you know, Adam's just shocked. He's missed his wife for so long, and he goes for a hug, and she's too busy fighting people off. That was just a cool little action scene. And I think the farewell between Laura and Adam was just really emotional and really sad. And they talk about, you know, somewhere in us we'll find each other again. And it was just for a character Laura, who was barely on the screen, we still wanted the two to be together, and it was like such a short, quick little time they spent together. It was just still felt really meaningful that we were seeing them apart from each other again, in the hope that, you know, they're going to get back together again. I think, you know, we're heading towards the end of the film now, and the two boys are with their dad. They rock up to his work, and they have a few penis jokes, and it's sort of followed up by the older Adam, where he's like, "Oh, so this is where you work, Dad?" And he's like, "It only took you 44 years to bring me here." And it was just a nice little play on this banter between all of the characters in this film, really. Inside that environment towards the end, Maya, the villain, I think, I'm not going to describe her downfall, because I think it was really clever, and I think it was great, and I think it played out really well and worked really well in this story. So a highlight for me. And finally, the conclusion to this, there's a farewell scene where, you know, the two Adams are with their dad, and there's some emotional discussions between the two, and they talk about loving each other. There's this nice hug, and then we've had this idea of baseball throughout, where, you know, they spent time with dad pitching the ball and things like that, and they just finished it in the yard, and that was just a really nice way to finish this film. And I'm not even going to put anything in here that I didn't like, because realistically, the only thing that I could possibly mention was that some of the CGI was a little bit iffy, and I think if this was going to get a release on a big screen, they probably would have needed to tighten some of the animation, or the CGI animation up, because it was a little bit jumpy at times, but it's such a minute thing in what, to me, is a really good film. So, some themes and some ideas in this one. I think that I've probably touched on a lot of them throughout as I've been talking about the characters and the scenes, but there's this idea of grief and loss, especially with time travel and the looking back on losing your father, and there's this comment throughout about it's easier to be angry than sad, and that's just such a true thing. Like, you can be so angry at the world when sometimes sadness can bring that out, and if you show your emotion, show your sadness, debrief, let it out, that can sometimes remove the anger. So I think that's a really nice thing that they touch on in this, as well as the idea of the father-son relationships. This would have been a perfect film to release around Father's Day. I think that realistically, though, this is about families as a whole, because we do see the commentary with the mother as well, and the need for good relationships with both your parents. It doesn't matter if they're separated. It doesn't matter if one's no longer with you, or that your parents are still together. You still need a good relationship, because your parents are always going to be there for you. And I think it's really nice recognition from Adam that's the case. And there's that tiny little touch too. You've got time travel, you've got the idea of science, and there are forces greater than science. There's humanity. Humanity is such an important thing. Science can't predict emotion. Science can't work out, you know, when you're going to feel sad. There might be algorithms and things like that, but realistically, the human mind is so much more powerful. And I think that, you know, especially when you're looking at a film that's about the end of the world, or things being destroyed, it's just nice to see the humanity in some people come through, especially in this film. That leads me into, what did I take away from this? And this one's probably the one little bit of negativity I'm going to bring into this podcast. And to me, I'm a little bit concerned with Ryan Reynolds. I think that he's possibly becoming typecast as the same character in every film that he's been doing at the moment. And this is that role that you see in Deadpool, the smart aleck, the wise cracks, the humor, those types of things. And I think that in Deadpool it worked really well. And then I did a podcast at the end of last year on Red Notice, which had Ryan Reynolds and The Rock, and he played the same sort of character in that. And then obviously if you've seen Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds and directed by the same director as this, then you've seen this character over and over and over again. So I think before Deadpool 3 comes out, which isn't probably going to be too far away, I'd love to see him try something a little bit different. I just think it'd be nice to see him, you know, he did a lot of good rom-coms back in the day, and was still able to be funny. So yeah, just a bit of a challenge for Ryan Reynolds, because I know that he's definitely listening to this podcast. That leads us into IMDb. So there's a part here where we say, okay, is there someone on screen that I recognized, I've seen from somewhere before, and I can't work out where it's from? So mine was just a confirmation. The Maya Saurian, the villain, the bad chick in this film, played by Catherine Keener. So I was like, that is Missy from Get Out, the mum from Get Out. And I picked it straight away, but there are a few times that I was second guessing myself, especially with some of the CGI on the de-aging of her character at various stages. But I jumped on, confirmed it. It's Missy from Get Out. And if you haven't seen Get Out, I highly recommend that film by Jordan Peele. All right, I think I'm almost ready to wrap this one up, and we give the film a rating out of 5 and see what we can come up with. So for me, I think that I really enjoyed this. I'm not sure why, but I did, and I think that this should go down maybe as one of the classic family films of like the 2020s, like a bit like Back to the Future, E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind from the 80s. That's my thoughts on this so far. I think that it just had so much heart that came with laughs, that came with engagement, that was entertaining. So I really suggest checking it out if you haven't seen it yet. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5, which is probably on the high end, but I'm real positive on this one. So please do check us out on social media if you can. If you've got Twitter, if you've got Facebook or Instagram, search for @Flix Forum. We're on there. We've got almost 200 episodes that we've done on Netflix original films. So if you can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your good podcasts, give us a holler. Question that I'm going to put up on social media for this one is this film better than Free Guy, the other recent Ryan Reynolds film? For me, 1000%. I disliked Free Guy. It was not a very good film, but I know there's a lot of people that liked Free Guy. So if you liked Free Guy, then I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy this one just as much. As always, thanks for hanging out and having a listen. Hope you've enjoyed what I've had to say, and give us some feedback if you can on any of our socials, and we'll be back for our normal episodes during the week.